we're looking at Rwanda, and we're seeing a scenario where Rwanda has joined the IMF's policy support initiative. Is this a milestone for the country?
Yeah, definitely. This is a milestone. It's a milestone in terms of by joining this program or initiative, it shows the commitment, and it's basically a vote of confidence to the administration of Rwandese government.
How exactly is the PSI going to work, Macharia?
Basically, PIS is an initiative that was started by IMF, and the whole idea is to be able to support low-income countries that have shown commitment to improving their governance and economic reforms. Rwanda definitely has done splendid job as far as structural reforms and economic reforms are concerned.
We'll talk about that in a bit. Kobe, I just want to bring you in here. How important is this policy initiative important for African countries?
Yeah, I think it's hugely important.
Okay.
I mean, if you think about African issues, if you think about poverty type issues, this is what the IMF was really created to do, is to take countries that are in serious trouble and try and alleviate the issues in those countries. And really speaking, G7 was set up in order to finance the IMF in order to do so. And really the thinking behind the IMF was always that it was trying to avert another catastrophe like we had in World War I and World War II, where you left a country just to its own devices, and where you potentially created such unhappiness with the system and with the faith that citizens had in that country that it spilled over into major catastrophe like a war. So that's really the focus of the IMF. The fact that the IMF today is bailing out G7 member countries like Greece and some other European countries, that wasn't really what it was meant for in the beginning.
Yeah. How exactly will this be viewed by other African countries? Will they be equally interested, seeing that Rwanda has made such good economic reforms and now they're part of the PSI, and the other African countries would also want to come on board?
Well, I think, if you talk about Africa itself, if you talk about other, and the players within it, the fact that Rwanda is part of this will potentially give other African countries the opportunity to potentially, look at the benchmark and look at how they could potentially become part of this as well, and potentially look at how they could potentially up the governance scale and how they could potentially, make use of the funding that the IMF does provide.
Yeah. Well, Macharia, I'm going to bring you back into the conversation. Take us through how exactly Rwanda weathered the economic crisis last year. We saw last year their GDP growth rate was at 5.5%. In 2008, it was minus 11%. So how exactly did Rwanda weather the global financial crisis?
Basically, one of the major things that Rwanda has done is in terms of corporate governance. If you look at President Kagame's administration, it has been very proactive. It has done a lot in terms of economic reforms. And basically, if you look at the report that was recently published by World Bank called Doing Business 2010, it has done Rwanda has done a good job in terms of economic reforms. In 2009, for example, the ease of doing business, of opening a business in Rwanda, was much harder. And in terms of ranking, out of 183 countries, it was ranked position 127. But if you look at the projections and the estimates for this year, they are estimated to be at position 27 out of 183. So if you look at all those things, including the protection of the investors, all those wrapped up together have made Rwanda a jewel in sub-Saharan Africa, and in terms of a potential place where you can do business in Africa.
Well, Macharia, at the World Economic Forum, we saw the finance minister of Rwanda hoping, or one of his key goals was to attract foreign direct investments into the country. Take us to what is the scenario like right now with FDIs there?
Okay, that would be very ambitious to be able to talk of cutting foreign direct investments. It would be a bit tricky because ideally Rwanda is still a small economy. It's a low-income economy, and 85% of the population depends mainly on rain-fed agriculture. So the idea of talking of cutting foreign direct investment may not really work, but it's an ambitious it is an ambitious program, and we'll watch and see how it turns out.
Well, during the global downturn, the big word or the big theme that came out of most African countries is that they should diversify. In your opinion, how would you rate Rwanda's diversification program currently?
That is one front that Rwanda administration has done a tremendous job. Initially, the economy, the GDP, 42% of the GDP depended on the agriculture. And if you look at currently, they have gone in 2008, really, minerals have overtaken agriculture as the main source or basically support to the GDP. If you look at ICT, they are doing a very fantastic job, and in fact, the Economist once quoted Rwanda as one of the best performing African countries as far as implementing ICT is concerned. So they are quickly headed to that direction of a knowledge-based economy, and through that they will be able to diversify their economy and to quickly move away from agriculture, because basically depending a lot on coffee, tea, and basically agriculture will be very hard to be able to move them to the next position where they want to be.
Well, Macharia, I'm going to just bring in Kobi now. We're hearing Macharia is very optimistic about Rwanda's diversification program, etc. But overall, do you think Africa is making great inroads into diversifying its economy?
Look, I think Africa as a general rule aren't diversifying as much as they possibly could. Yeah. But then it's also part and parcel of the situation that they're in from an economic perspective. So if you look at Africa, African countries have major social issues at hand. They're living in a world where potentially developed countries are just, leaping ahead of the development in those countries, and they're putting their citizens on a par of, and on a social standing that you're just not seeing in African countries. So you're sitting with this as an objective, and you're sitting with these issues in African countries, and you have to find a way out of that. And the question is, potentially by looking at, and I'm now generalizing quite, and I'm not speaking specifically about Rwanda, but if you look at if you look at ways in which you can grow an economy, potentially creativity is potentially better than just trying to diversify. Creativity sometimes can help you achieve something far beyond what anybody else can achieve. Let's use Kenya as an example with their flower growing industry. That's a fantastic example where creativity has led to a solution for a country which today provides most of the forex in that country. Yeah. Now Rwanda is in a situation where you're coming off such a low base. The country was decimated through its genocide attacks. It's
16 years ago.
Yeah, correct. So 1994 that ended. So you're sitting off a political base now where there's no issues really at play anymore. It's about trying to grow this economy.
Yeah.
And it's about
but isn't it also about how much government is willing to put down money for it?
No, absolutely, but that's where the IMF comes in. Okay. So you're not necessarily sitting with the cash at hand, but the IMF is providing loans into your system. You're providing a decent political system whereby you're trying to create a base where you can create taxes from that, and you're trying to create decent spending from that. And if governments do that appropriately and decently, then you're going to start seeing GDP start growing more and more and more. It's about really trying to have that happening. If you've got a ciphering off type situation where for every $100 that lands in the system, only $5 end up going back into the land or going back to the people and looking at poverty alleviation, that's not a system that can work. No. But for every $100 that hit the system, if you've got at least $60 or $70 or $50 even hitting the system at the bottom end, you're going to see some serious poverty alleviation type strategies coming to the foreground.